Welcome back everyone. So in this video we are going to discuss about simulation by using Microsoft Excel with and without VBA. So for those who are interested in knowing simulation and also inverse transform method, you can watch the other video that I have recorded earlier. So in this video we look at the task that we are trying to simulate. So for example, this is a very simplified scenario. So we are flipping a coin. So if we get a tail, then we will throw a fair dice. If we get a head, then we will throw an unfair die, which is having the following distribution, probability distribution. So this is the PMF, probability mass function. Okay, so in order to simulate these unfair dice, we will have to use VLOOKUP by using approximate matching, which we have also talked about this in the previous video. Okay, so in order to simulate a fair die, we can use the function in Excel using RAND between, rand between. Okay, so 1 to 6. So this will be basically giving us an simulation of fair dice. That means a uniform distribution, discrete uniform distribution 1 to 6. So flipping a fair coin would be also could be using the same thing as well. For example, we can do rand between and then 0 1. So 0 is a tail, 1 is a head, right? Or you can also do something like if function, if RAND, so this is like inverse transform method, is less than 0.5, then it will be tail. And if it is more than or equal to 0.5, then it will be, you will be getting a head, right? So you can also use if function together with RAND function. So the RAND function is to generate uniform random number from continuous uniform distribution 0 to 1. Okay, so in this example we will use rand between 0 1 to indicate fair dice or fair coin. Okay, so now we will look at how do we achieve this task. So you can view this thing as like a simplified version of a scenario simulation. For example, a fair coin of tail and head is like raining or not raining, right? So if raining, then what is the business volume that we expect following some distribution? If not raining, then what is the distribution? So of course, in real life, this kind of simulation would be much more complicated. So this is a very simplified version. So let's look at what are the methods that we can use. So in this video, we will discuss 4 different approaches. All of them are actually similar, except that the techniques that we use is slightly different. So first one, we will use a formula like what we demonstrated earlier, rand between 0 1, and then to repeat for 10,000 times. And then the second one will be using the formula with data table to repeat this thing for 10,000 times as well. Okay, and the third one and fourth will be using VBA. So the third one is basically we set up the formula in spreadsheet and use VBA to repeat it for 10,000 times. And the fourth one will be using VBA. All the calculation will be in VBA. Spreadsheet, we will keep it as a record. So it's to store the result that we have. Okay, so of course in number 3 and number 4, when you talk about VBA, so there are certain things that you need to be very careful or need to be slightly more careful, is that using the usage of array function. Okay, so we try not to read and write every time you complete one simulation, okay, or every time you complete one calculation, because that will slow down the efficiency of the code. So in order to speed it up, you probably need to use array function. Okay, so we will look at the first approach now. So of course, different approaches here, we will save it as different file so that later on we can compare the file size. So first one, using Excel, advantage of using this approach is that we can see and directly what is going on, and we get a better feeling of this approach or this scenario. So in order to get coin or the fair coin, right? So head or tail. So head is 0, tail is 1. Okay, so we use a rand between, it would be easier. 0 1, head tail 0 1. Okay, so the first simulation is head. Of course, you can press F9 to recalculate this thing, and you can see that the number is changing. Okay, So now let's look at the task. If it is a head, then it's unfair die, right? So if it is a tail, then it would be a fair die. Okay, so before that, let me just delete this one first, and then we will construct this table. Okay, so in the previous video, I mentioned that we can use VLOOKUP to perform this inverse transform technique for a discrete random variable. So you can also use lookup function. Okay, so there are two VLOOKUP with approximate matching or lookup function as well. So you can also have this function. Of course, we are not talking about the new version of the new function, which is the XLOOKUP. Okay, so now let us just indicate that this is 0 is a head, right, and 1 is tail. Okay, so that is what we want. Of course, we can change the font color to red. Okay, right, so I'm adding this information here so that I can save this file, and then the same information will appear in all 4 different approaches later on. Okay, so now in order to get what we need, basically we have to perform something like let's look at this one. All right, so for those who are not familiar with VLOOKUP with approximate matching, you may want to watch the other video that I've recorded earlier. Okay, right, so we first construct the CDF, and then of course CDF let px less than x is of course 1, 0.1, and then this one is this one plus this one, right? And eventually you hope that you get a 1. Okay, right, so that first column here, column F here, is CDF, PMF, and this is the x, the value that you want to simulate. So you don't really need this one. You can change this to like no border, and okay, right, so it looks better now. Okay, so in order to simulate this one, of course you cannot use this 0.1, you have to use the lower bound. Okay, so let's cut this one and paste it to the right hand side so that we get the lower bound. And then of course I just want to change the label to lower bound. So this should be 0, and then the lower bound for the second number is 0.1. Okay, and then this thing will just repeat. Okay, so now with this on, with this setup, then you can do a VLOOKUP of random number generated from RAND function, and then VLOOKUP for the 4th column using the true argument or using the approximate matching. Okay, now let's come to here. So I will save this file, and then we repeat this four approaches. Okay, first thing, RAM between, right? So RAM between 0, 1. And then of course, we also mentioned just now that when it is a 0, then it's a head. Head is using this unfair dice, right? So, and if it is a tail, then we will be using a fair die. Okay, so 1 is fair die. So we will do if function. If this number is equal to 1, then it would be RAM between 1 to 6. So you see, if this is 1, I throw a fair dice. Otherwise, I will do a VLOOKUP or lookup function, also same, RAND, this random variable, and then the table array, we will go to here, and then don't forget, select the whole table. Without the header is also fine, but you need to press F4 to lock the formula. So I will enlarge the formula later. For and then true, not false but true. Okay, right, so let's see. So don't forget to lock the table array. Okay, so that is what you have here, and then you can see that now if C5 is equal to 1, you do a RAM between here. So it's a uniform distribution from 1 to 6, discrete uniform. And then if it is not equal to 1, that means if C5 is equal to 0, then you do a VLOOKUP of the table that we have just constructed earlier. So this will give you the scenario you want. Okay, and then of course you can repeat, copy the formula down. Same thing here, you can copy the formula down as well. So then you have, by doing so, you successfully simulated this event for 10,000 times. Okay, so again, you can view coin as like raining, not raining. The die is like the number of business or number of order you receive. Okay, so now you can save this file, and then we will save this file as 1.xlsx, right? So press F4 to F12 to use save as, and then I will save it as the name 1. okay, so that we can compare the files later on. Okay, so I will close this file, and then of course you can see I have new file added here. Now we move on to the second approach. Okay, so same thing here, the task. Okay, so let's change this one to red color, save it first. Okay, right, so 0 is tail, head, 1 is tail, right, and this is the simulation. So we repeat the same formula here. Actually, instead of copy paste down, you can actually do the same thing. So what is the advantage of doing these second approaches is that you see in this situation the formula can be copied down for 10,000 rows, then that is fine. But sometimes you have a very complicated calculation, like for example you may have situation like this, right? So for example the sales, and then of course sales here is a random number, right, random variable, and then you have the cost here probably is like 75% of sales, variable cost of course, and then you have rental, I should put variable cost, okay, and then rental and etc. Okay, so this is a random variable, and then you have a very complicated scenario simulation, and then you finally get to one answer. You want to repeat this for 10,000 times, so that would be probably taking you quite some time, because you can't use this approach anymore, like this one, copy paste down the formula like what we did earlier. Because why? Because you have the setup in vertical form. Okay, so sometimes you may not be able to do that. Okay, so of course we can look at one of the example on what type of this simulation is, right? So for example, if you look at this one, you can see that I have this quite complicated template here, and then a lot of calculation. Of course, this part should be a data. So and then after that, until the end of the calculation, because data is not there, right? So all these are hash and name function. Okay. Also because I'm using this WPS office here. Okay, so then you can see that the calculation eventually get you to one final number. So this final number is based on a lot of calculation in front. Right, so if I want to repeat this thing for 10,000 times, I cannot do the same thing like what we did earlier. So in this kind of situation, you may want to use data table. So how do we use data table? Basically, it would be things like this. So we repeat the same thing, like for example, RAM between 0, 1, and then we can use the same formula, right? So if this one is equal to 1, then RAM between 1 to 6. Okay, else we will be using VLOOKUP of a random number, and then from this task here, and then select this table, log the table F4, and then fourth column, true argument. Right, so you simulated this one again. Okay, so instead of copy and paste down the formula, now you can select the whole table. From here, the column B to column D, right? Select the whole table, go to data tab, and then you can choose what if analysis, data table. So what this does is that basically we want to repeat this data table for 10,000 row, right? So what we have selected here. And then we say that, okay, the column is changing, right? So we want to, based on this column, and then make it to different row. So what is the input? Input, you put it here. Okay, so that means you will insert this 1 to here, and then 2 to here, and so on. So we make use of the properties that every time you enter, as long as because every time you enter one number, Excel by default will recalculate everything, right? So when they recalculate, all the random number function will also recalculate, so you get 10,000 times. So you ask Excel to put in like insert 1 to 10,000 in this F4. It could be any other blank cell that you are not using. Okay, so then click OK. You can see that we get 10,000 simulation as well. Okay, so that is what we have here. Okay, so of course, advantage of this first and second approach is that once you press F9, you get another 10,000 simulation. Okay, you press F9 one more time to recalculate, you get another 10,000 simulation. So now we save this file as number 2, right? So we have the second approaches done. Now we look at the next next approach. Okay, so we will close this file, and then this one no longer needed. So let me just don't save this file, and then open a blank one again. Right. Okay, so now let's look at this part. We are looking at this VBA with formula, right? So what we are trying to do here is that now it's still the same thing. Okay, and then we insert the formula here. We get VBA to recalculate for us for 10,000 times. Okay, so if you have already inserted here, then it's actually 9,999 times. So we repeat the same formula again. So I should have copied and pasted earlier, but that is fine. It wouldn't take too much of the time, right? So if this is equal to 1, then RND between 1 to 6. Else we do a VLOOKUP of a random number, and then where's the array, which is this one, right? So select the whole thing, press F4 to log it, and then fourth column, and then true argument. Okay, right? So so you can see over here, we instead of using data table or copy paste value, you want to get this situation to rerun like 10,000 times, and then you store the number. So it would be similar with this situation here. So this is a complicated template, but anyway, we are not going into this. So what we are trying to do here is that you can see after you calculate for a long calculation, of course, some random number is inside. So then you get one final number. You want to repeat the whole calculation on top this 172 rows above for 10,000 times. So you recalculate 10,000 times, copy paste value. Just like you press F9 one time, you write down the number on paper and so on, right? So you want to repeat or automate this process using VBA. Now under developer tab, so if you have not learned how to start enable developer tab, you can watch my other VBA video. So now we have the insert and then module. So we insert one module, and then of course you can rename the module and so on, but over here we just want something simple. So you want to recalculate, and then you want to copy these two values, right? So sub and then run simulation. Okay, so let me see if I still can make this thing. Okay, slightly larger, right? So we use a subroutine, and then you name it as run or any name that you prefer. Okay, so I use run here, and then of course I define two variable. Over here you can see I will start with one approach that is slightly less efficient, and then I will use array for the second approach here. So we will stick to the second one. Okay, now we define two variables. One is the coin, right? Another one is coin as integer. And then define dim is to define the variable or declare the variable, right? So the die as integer as well. Okay, right? So usually all the names that I declare, I will make it capital letter, so that when I type in, I see that as you can see, I've typed in coin without capital C. Press enter, you see the C becomes capital letter, so I know that there is no typo. If let's say there is a typo, the C will not change to capital letter, right? So that is the habit that I have here. The variable that I declare, most of the time I will use capital letter. Okay, so now we can actually read the value from this cell, right? So the coin is actually C5, right? So coin, C-O-I-N, coin is equal to worksheets, and then the name VBA with formula. Okay, dot range or cell also can. We will use range C5. Okay, so with this then we actually successfully read this value. Okay, now is CD, right? So D, and then this should be a die. Okay, so you can see I will type lowercase, and then I press enter, D will become uppercase. Okay, so with this successfully read, then we will paste it to repeat for 10,000 times. But bear in mind, the first row we have already used the formula, so you only need to repeat for 9,999 times, right? So next I. Okay, so we are using I here, so I will define I as long. Okay, because we are running simulation, right? So I will define as long, or so that instead of integer it is long. So integer is until 32,000 if I'm not mistaken. Okay, 32,000 something basically. Okay, now we want to repeat this thing. We can actually we should actually move this thing in, okay, into the for loop. Okay, so repeat for 9,999 times. So I put in a comment here, and then of course we can tab to align it. So the first time I read this value, okay, so before we read, we want it to be recalculated. Application.recalculate calculate. Okay, so this one is calculate. Actually I should use recalculate so that we get new values. Okay, so this one is to read values, and then you write it below, right? So write values, and then now you should have something similar, except that we are not using reading now, so delete this one, equal to coin, right? Of course, now instead of C5, you cannot use C5 because you want to write as C6, C7, C8, C9, right? So we have to use the formula CLL as cell. Okay, cells I plus 5. Okay, so because I starts from 1, but the first one you want it at row 6 and then column 3. Okay, now with this, then you can repeat the same thing. CLS I plus 5 and then column 4, which is D equal to die. Right, so we delete this one. So with this, then you can see that we actually can run 9,000. Over here you press F5 to run the subroutine, right? So it is running now. I press F5, or you press the right, the triangle, green color triangle over here. Okay, so waiting for a while for this to run. Okay, so we will wait for a while here. So you can see that this simulation is actually take up quite some time. Of course, first of all, I'm running on VirtualBox, so the computing power is not that great. Secondly is that the read and write here is taking a lot of time. So one of the good way of running this VBA or this kind of situation is that you read everything into array and then you write everything into the worksheets in one off. Okay, so I will illustrate this one later. Okay, so let's look at this one. Okay, so successfully run 10,000 times, and you can see that over here this is a formula, the first row, right? So formula that we actually put it in. But these are actually numbers because it's a sort of like a copy paste kind of idea, right? So actually what the code is doing is that you copy this one and then you paste as value, something like that, right? So copy again and then paste as value again, and then you copy again, paste as value again. So you repeat this thing for 10,000 times, this kind of concept. So but you can see that this approach is not too efficient. So we are going to change this thing a little bit. So you define coin as like 1 to 9,000. You can define it to 10,000, but in this case, we know that you are using 9,999, right? So you can define them as an array, and then now you say that, okay, coin I, the first coin, and then until the first die, right? You read everything. Okay, so you see you get the Excel to recalculate, and then you read. So it's like you store everything into the memory. After you have read this thing for 9,999 times, then you paste this thing into Excel file. Okay, so I have deleted this one. We try one more time. So we need 2 more lines here. Worksheets. Okay, let me just copy and paste, will be faster, right? So over here, because we know that it would be from C6 to C1000, 10,004, right? So C6 to C10,004, okay, equal to coin. So application dot transpose. So it will be in horizontal, but if you want to place it vertically, then you have to transpose it. Okay, so now you can repeat the same thing for column D now. Okay, so column D would be the die. Okay, so you can see this thing is running. So okay, I think completed, right? So it would be slightly faster, and it's actually more efficient because you don't have to read write every time, right? So imagine just now we are doing something like you copy here and then paste value, and then you copy again and then paste value again. So it's like a lot of work if you do it manually. Just visualize it in this way. So now this one is like I press F9, I memorize 04 0316, and then I will type in 04 0316. But of course typing is slow, but you memorize everything and then you paste everything at once. Okay, so it will be faster. So this is actually the approach that is more efficient. Use array to do this simulation. Okay, so this file we will save it as like macro enable. So before that, let's run this thing one more time so that we get to the answer. So you can see the running is actually faster now. Of course, you can add like application.screen updating to be false and so on. So how to improve the efficiency, you can watch the other video that I have recorded, I think somewhere in last year. Okay, so that is what we have here. Now save this file as macro enable. So because we want the macro to be there, save it as number 3. Okay, and then save it under desktop. Okay, so close this file and then we start a blank one again. So we will try the 4th method now. So we are taking a little bit of time, so I think it's about 30 minutes now. Okay, but this video is slightly longer, but that's fine because we talk about a lot of different methods. Okay, so properties. So insert this module, one module. So now number 4, the number 4th method or approach, right? So we want to calculate everything in VBA. Instead of using application.calculate to recalculate and get the new value, you want to calculate everything here. So use subrun again, and then define, don't forget coin 1 to, this one you have to do 1 to 10,000, okay, as integer because I'm only 1 and 0, right? So define die also 1 to 10,000. You run 10,000 times, right? As integer also because it's either 1 to 6. Okay, then define I as long. I is the counter for the simulation. For I equal to 1. So why we are using array for coin and die? So it's the same reason as the previous approach. Okay, so next I. Now over here we do the formula inside here instead of in Excel. Okay, so coin I equal to you can try to see you type in rem between and then you realize that this is not here, right? So this function. So one of the ways you can use application dot worksheet function dot rem between. Okay, so you can use something like this. Of course, you can also do something like what is that called? Using the RND function. So we will do it for the die. Okay, so die I will be equal to. So how do we deal with this thing is that you want to do without using VLOOKUP function. So you basically want to calculate the simulation, right? So simulating this discrete event, because this is no longer what is that called? No longer uniform. If it is the let's see, forgotten, the head, right? So if it is head, which is 0, so that means over here, let's put in here, throw, this is throw a coin, okay? Then throw a die. Okay, so if coin I is equal to 0, so if it is 0 means what? Head. Head means unfair dice, right? So we can start with something that is easier. If it is 1, then throw fair dice. And then else, you want to throw the unfair die. Okay, and if, okay, so you can see that the coding here, the codes is actually getting longer because we put everything in this VBA, right? So if it is this one, then you say that die I is equal to, again, you can also use this application dot worksheet function dot ran between 0, 1 to 6, right? So this is the if function that you have in the Excel just now. So it's the same thing, you can do the same thing, but over here now, because it is not fair die, so we will see how do we deal with this thing. So UNIRV, uniform random variable, as double, okay? So that means it is a decimal. So of course in VBA, whether you declare the variable or not, is not important, but I will still suggest to always declare the variable. Okay, UNIRV equal to RND. Okay, so bear in mind, in Excel, you are use RAND. In VBA, you use RND. Okay, the ND is lowercase. Okay, so it's the same thing. Now, so once you have this random variable, then you can create a for loop for all. Actually, you can create a for loop to run this thing, or you can use this VLOOKUP, right? So create a for loop is not too efficient, so I think I will just not use this one. I don't use this, as better. Okay, so bear in mind one thing, you can see that if you can just create a case, right, or a 6 scenario, but anyway, we can do this VLOOKUP. So of course, I mentioned just now, we try not to use VLOOKUP, but of course, considering that every time we have to run the for loop to recalculate the same table every time, so it's not too efficient, so I decided not to use the for loop. Okay, so if you are using like other distribution, maybe you have to use for loop. Okay, so in this case, using VLOOKUP is still more efficient. Okay, but VLOOKUP, of course, you can also read all these things as a table, as an array in the VBA. Okay, so VLOOKUP of this UNIRV, and then the table array would be task worksheets, task dot range F6 to I12, right? So F7 to I12. Okay, and then 4th column, and then true. Let's check. Okay, should be fine. Okay, then in this, by doing that, then you have completed this simulation, and then of course the next part is just to paste the what's that called, the array into the worksheet that you want VBA only, right? So worksheets VBA only dot range C5 to when to where C5 to C1004, right? So C5 to C1004 equal to application dot transpose So this is actually the transpose function, right? Transpose of the coin. And then you can change this to D, change this to D, and then of course this one change to die. Okay. So running the simulation, you can see you get the result almost immediately. So run one more time. Let me see. Press F5. Oh, sorry. Press F5. You can see the simulation done, and then you get all the result. Okay. So that is actually quite fast. This approach. Let's see one more time. So of course over here I'm still using the worksheet function. So we will see if we have chance. We will look at the for loop in the future. Okay, so let's save this file as the file number 4. Of course, we have to change this thing to macro enable. Okay, right. So now we have completed all this simulation, and of course we look at the file size. So first thing we look at different approaches here, right? So you can see that the first. Okay, so not too familiar with the. Okay, right. So we just want to focus here. Okay, right. So you can see that. Let me zoom in because I'm not too familiar with Microsoft Windows. Okay, let me zoom out a bit. Okay, so you can see that the original file size is actually 614 KB. Using the first one with formula, which has a lot of formula, it's actually having like 744 KB. So the second one is only one row of formula, and then the rest is using data table, right? So slightly lesser. And then number 3 and number 4, you can see that it is actually getting slightly higher, but generally 2, 3, 4 are around the same size. So using formula repeat for 10,000 row is actually less efficient. If that is the case, you can actually consider to use data table, or of course it depends on your scenario or situation. If you are only running this one for like one time off, use the easiest method to construct the template. If you need to rerun the formula or rerun the simulation quite frequently, you may want to use method number 4 because it's more efficient in terms of running time. Okay, so using array, using VBA without formula will actually reduce the file size, also reduce the computing time. Okay, so number 2 is also not too efficient. Of course, using number 3 and number 4, you can see that pressing F9 will not rerun the 10,000 time. Number 1 and number 2 will actually rerun the 10,000 time, right? So if you need like 10,000 times, you are not satisfied, you want to rerun it, you press F9 will do. Okay, so using 3 and 4, you basically, if you want to have something that is easier to rerun, you may want to use keyboard shortcut, or you may want to insert a button to execute the subroutine that you have written earlier. Okay, so that is the end of the video. This is on simulation, 4 different approaches, and I will see you in the next video again.